We've read the original text of the Constitution, young historians, and now it's time to get into the fun stuff, the Bill of Rights. Fun because, number one, it applies to you. It applies to your life, it applies to my life. It's not just some bigwigs that are sitting over in Washington, D.C. kind of making decisions that we don't think deal with us every day. These are things that deal with our rights, our freedoms, and the limits in our freedoms. It's also fun because we can come up with a lot of what-ifs, and those what-ifs are always a lot of fun to talk about in and out of class. So, we are going to get going by digging into the Bill of Rights. Okay, gang, here's the first part of your Bill of Rights preparation or learning experience. I've got it all spelled out for you on the Bill of Rights handout here, and you'll notice you've got your target that you can identify and apply the protections and limits of the Bill of Rights to actual situations. That's my goal. We're trying to make this real world, trying to make it matter, right? So, to start, I want you to read the story of the Bill of Rights. It's not a very long story, right here. It's got our good friends George Mason and James Madison. Tell you a little bit about how the Bill of Rights came to be. You already know a little bit about it with the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. But that's going to be your first step. Should take a couple minutes. Then, I'm going to send you to a little video that I made that gives you an overview of just the First Amendment. We're going to spend all of our next class just on that First Amendment. I mean, I'd love to spend an entire semester on the First Amendment, but we're going to do it in a class, and then it'll come up again and again during the year. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch that video, and you're going to take some notes right in this box, there, and this side right here. See where it says in school? We're going to do that in school. So you don't have to worry about that. But I want you to get some background information on the First Amendment. And I honestly think you're going to like this because there's a lot of what-ifs, a lot of kind of sort of, can I do this? Can I not do this? You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased. After you're done, you can kind of check yourself. Do you understand these topics right here? If you don't, make sure you identify those and let me know so that I can make sure that you have command of those. And then we're going to use this information in class on Wednesday and Thursday. Also, you can write down your questions down here and any scenarios, any what-ifs. You know, my example is, can somebody marry more than one person if it's part of their religion? And come up with as many of those as you can from the First Amendment, your religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition freedoms. So let's dig into the Bill of Rights. The original Bill of Rights is located on your left. On your right is the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments, first 10 amendments to the Constitution. As you'll see in your reading, there were originally 12, but we have 10. You don't have to memorize them word for word. You don't have to memorize them really as much by number. The number is somewhat important, but I'll give you an example. I often put 5 and 6 together, especially for 8th grade historians. So the most important thing is really understand the concepts and understand how we can apply them to our lives today and to situations today, because that's your target. All right, your target is to be able to understand the limits and the freedoms of the Bill of Rights and be able to apply them to situations today. That's how I know you really understand this important part of our awesome society. Now, the definition of a Bill of Rights with a little b and a little r is a listing of the rights and liberties of the people. And that's something that you already know a little bit about because of the English Bill of Rights, which influenced the framers of the Constitution. But the big B of Bill, big R of rights, is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which lists the rights and liberties of the people. So when we talk about the Bill of Rights, we're talking about the first 10 amendments. That's where you can find them. And when we look at your rights, what we have to do is we have to have this balancing act. And we look at the rights of an individual, say the rights of me or Mr. Strains or any one of you as an individual or anyone in my community. And we have to balance it with the rights of the community, because sometimes we'll see that our rights will conflict. What happens when my freedom of religion it conflicts with somebody's freedom of assembly or something like that, which happens. So this balance is what courts take a look at, and the judicial branch is who will take a look at the situation. They'll interpret the law, and they will come up with a decision. And because it's a federal law, because it's the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the federal government would have the jurisdiction for this. A little word that we learned in class on Monday or Tuesday. Today we're looking only at the First Amendment. It's the big one, religious and political freedom. And I'm going to give it to you word for word here. You don't have to write it down word for word. You're going to get the basics. But it starts out with, Congress shall make no law. It's important to note that it says Congress shall make no law because the Bill of Rights, when written, only applied to Congress. It only applied to the national government. They actually put some stuff originally about states, but then they took it out. So originally it only applied to the national government. Congress shall make no law. Since then, we've got this thing called selective incorporation, which we'll come back to at the end of this presentation, the second time you see it. The Supreme Court has applied the Bill of Rights to the states because of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. So if we see that there's a freedom of religion or that the Congress or the national government can't do something to violate your rights, neither can the states, sometimes. And that's been up to the courts. But that's a term you're going to want to know, selective incorporation. Or incorporation means applying the Bill of Rights to the states. The first freedom in the First Amendment is the freedom of religion. And it was put first because it was what some people thought was the most important. Is it the most important to you? We'll find out on your poll. But there are two clauses in the First Amendment about religion, two different clauses, and these are on your notes. The first one is called the Establishment Clause. And this says that the government cannot respect an establishment of religion. Now, not everybody agrees on what the establishment of a religion means, or exactly what that looks like in society. But the best way to put it is that there is a separation of church and state. In general, the government, our government, should not have anything to do with religion. It should not support one religion over another. It should not denounce one religion over another. Some people would argue that it should just keep hands off of religion totally, not even promote all religions. But it's supposed to mean that the government and the religion are separate. They are not influenced whatsoever. They don't influence each other whatsoever. Okay? You know, a state or federal government can't set up a church. They can't pass laws to aid one religion. They can't pass laws to prefer one over another. They can't force people to do anything with religion, and they've applied this freedom and this protection over a long period of time. And a lot of this happens in schools, and we'll be taking a look at some court cases about religion in schools. But you know, one of the questions is, can the federal government have a Christmas tree? Can there be a national Christmas tree? That's a good question, because doesn't that support one religion over another? Can the federal government or a state government or a local government start school with a prayer? Or start a court case with a prayer? Or have the Ten Commandments posted? There's a whole bunch of different aspects about differentiating between the government and religion. Okay? The second clause about religion is that the government cannot prohibit the free exercise thereof. This is called the Free Exercise Clause. It's pretty easy to understand what the Free Exercise Clause means. The government can't stop you from exercising your religion. No matter how you exercise your religion, the government can't interfere with it. Now, there are limits to that too. Can the government limit your exercising of religion if you commit human sacrifice? Yeah, they can. You still got to follow local laws. But the laws can't be passed to limit your religion. They could be passed for safety, like human sacrifice. So there's a lot of interesting cases that we can take a look at too about exactly when can the government limit your freedom of religion, your exercise of your religion. But those are the two religion clauses, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The next freedom is that no law can abridge the freedom of speech. Now, this was huge because when the framers wrote this, in a democracy, speech is essential, especially political speech. You got to have a free exchange of opinions and ideas, because if you don't, you can't govern yourself. It's necessary for self-government. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that speech isn't just spoken words. Free speech also involves other types of expression. There's pure speech, which are like debates and public meetings. that involves spoken words alone. There's Speech Plus, where you do demonstrations that combine speech with action. And then there's symbolic speech or expressive conduct, actions that are the message without the spoken words. That could be protesting by burning the American flag or by kneeling during the national anthem. Kind of in the news lately, huh? So these are the different types of speech, and I'm going to tell you that political speech is the speech that is protected more than anything else. Without a doubt, it is the most protected form of speech, that political speech. You'll also find out that there is the right not to speak in some cases. The freedom of speech has been protected throughout time. Now, there are limits to your freedom of speech. And when I say limits, you still can say these things, but they're not protected, which means you can get in trouble for them. An example would be obscenity. Obscenity is, bad words or bad pictures or actions. You know what I'm talking about. Explicit lyrics kind of stuff on Spotify. It's hard to define obscenity, though, because what's obscene to one person might not be obscene to another. But obscenity is not protected speech. Defamation is not protected speech. Hurting someone's reputation by spreading lies about them and trying to hurt them. That's not protected speech. If it's spoken defamation, it's slander. If it's written defamation, it's libel. The hard thing about defamation is you got to prove that somebody's intending to hurt somebody else with their statements. Hate speech is not necessarily protected. When it comes to hate speech about somebody's race, somebody's religion, somebody's gender, somebody's sexual orientation, there have been limits placed on that type of speech. Any speech that incites illegal action is not necessarily protected. You can't, if you say, hey, let's go out and murder a bunch of people, you can get in trouble for that. It can be, harassment or whatever it is. There's a law actually called if it causes a clear and present danger. And we're going to talk a little bit about your speech in schools, and public schools is limited as well. And it's limited much more than it is outside of school. The third freedom is the freedom of the press. This is a huge freedom. Thomas Jefferson was a firm believer that no democracy can be free without the freedom of the press. And governments have always exercised censorship over the press, and the framers wanted to make sure that our press was free. Now, originally, freedom of the press was supposed to be the printed word, the newspaper. But since then, back then, books and newspapers. But since then, you've got, anything from TV and movies and broadcast over the air and radio to now the big question is the internet. How free is the internet? And that's still something that we don't have the total knowledge of. But in other words, in kind of in a nutshell, the press is pretty much free. The government, can't stop people from printing things or, doing them in the press, whatever form of the press. Now, they can be punished for them afterwards, but they can't stop you from doing it. There is one thing called prior restraint. The government's not supposed to stop a work or censor a work before it is published. There are some limits to that, though. An example of where that could be limited is if you are inciting a legal act or you are, giving out national secrets. If you got the nuclear codes for the United States, you couldn't just print them all. The government could stop you from doing that. Again, non-print media is a little different here. That's that's where the law is still a little bit gray, but that's one of the questions that you're going to want to ask, or maybe a scenario is what is something that can be broadcast over the radio or over TV, and what are the limits on that? That would be freedom of press. The last two are the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and then the freedom of petition. Peaceable assembly has been around for a long time. If you think the British were trying to limit the right of the people to peaceably assemble in the colonies, so that peaceable assembly has been around. It has to be peaceable, And the government can have some restrictions on it. And those restrictions are usually time, place, and manner. The government can restrict the time of an assembly, can restrict the place of the assembly, and can restrict the way people assemble or petition. But they can't restrict it based on the message. They got to restrict it based on the action. You know, you do not have a right to assemble in the middle of a highway during rush hour with fireworks. That doesn't work out. You also don't have the right to assemble in my living room while I'm asleep playing your tuba. Does anybody play the tuba? I don't know. If you do, don't come over. So there are some limits on that, but the limit is not supposed to be the limit on the message. It's supposed to be the limit on the time, the place, or the manner. The freedom of assembly has also been associated or been characterized as the freedom of association. It's not listed, but it is protected, meaning that you can kind of associate with people that you want to, and that you can also exclude people from your organization if you want to. There's been examples, you know, of all male or all female clubs. Those are illegal. You know, an all boys or an all girls school, that's legal because of the freedom of association. The right of petition. Petition is any nonviolent legal means of encouraging or disapproving government action. Lobbying, letter writing, email campaigns, testifying before courts, filing a lawsuit, collecting signatures for a ballot, you know, getting a petition. Any public, you know, statement of you know, the issues and complaints. You could argue that taking a knee at the at NFL games is petition. They're asking the government to change some stuff. That is another huge aspect of the First Amendment. So those are the 5 parts of the First Amendment. Okay, religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. Sometimes they're all lumped together as freedom of expression. Okay, in the United States, we are allowed to express ourselves pretty much any way we want. There are limits, but we do have freedom of expression, especially if it is political thought. Now, one of my goals is to make sure you are not one of these people who can't name or don't know anything about the First Amendment. Okay? And so, 37% of the people asked couldn't name any of the specific rights guaranteed by the First Amendment. One way to remember it is RAPS. Religion, Assembly, Press, Petition, Speech. RAPS. Religion, Assembly, Press, Petition, Speech. You don't have to know them in order. Religion is called the first freedom, but no worries about that. But RAPS, Religion, Assembly, Press, Petition, Speech. Commit that to memory, and that way you won't be one of these people that we make fun of in class. When you're done, head over to your favorite 8th grade American history website. It's probably the only one you know, but that's okay. I'll take that. And take a look at some other resources that you have up here. A lot of cool things you might want to check out. You might want to check out this. This is kind of cool. First Amendment in schools, if you're interested. First Amendment for Dummies, always good. I'm a dummy. I like it. And I do want you to do 2 other things. I want you to check your section, click on it, and I want you to post one of your scenarios. All you got to do is click on one of these stickies. Boop. All right. Put whatever you want here, and then come down and put your tag, for your tag, put your name. It can be first name, last initial. But put a scenario like mine. Can a person marry more than one spouse if it is part of his or her religion? So do that, and those will be some good scenarios that we can talk about in class tomorrow. We got to love those questions, right? And then second thing I want you to do is come down to this form, put your name, first name is fine, your class section, and the most important of the 5 freedoms to you. Is it religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition? And then just give your reason why you feel that's your most important freedom. And we'll kind of use this to crowdsource what we think is the most important of the amendments, or the freedoms in the First Amendment, of the 5 freedoms. So we're going to do that for just the First Amendment for our next class. There's a little First Amendment quiz here that maybe you could take a look at. I think it still works, does it? Let's see. Yeah, it does. Look at that. So you can try that out as well. All right. So again, our next class, Wednesday and Thursday, it's going to be all about your freedoms, your 5 freedoms in the First Amendment: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. Good times, fun times. We will we'll get more constitutional.